Hey, Rockstars, it's Andrew Houston here from Profit Contractors. Welcome to another no bullshit podcast for contractors. We are going to rock the house today. You got me solo, and what we're going to be covering off is some of the aspects, not all the aspects, just some of the aspects of how we can ensure we are pricing our jobs profitably. Let's get into this, okay? So, what are some of the problems that we have when we're pricing jobs? Well, there's lots of problems, okay? What I'm going to be covering off today is not like 15 different things about pricing. And we're going to talk about one specific area. And that specific area is dealing with the problem of making sure that you're pricing jobs profitably specific to your business. You see, what happens a lot of times is contractors, okay? This is how I used to do it. I used to go out for breakfast with the boys, go out for a couple of pints after work, and we start talking about pricing jobs. We start talking about all the different sales that we had landed, all the different work that we had gotten, and upcoming work that we had to quote and what have you. And pricing would always come into the conversation, all right? And typically what would happen at these meetings is we would sort of like just generally discuss how much each guy is putting on their jobs. And the intention was right. The intention to help each other was right, but the method behind it was wrong. Okay. And I'm going to be getting into that. Okay. So if you're pricing your jobs right now and you're basing it upon a discussion that you've had at breakfast or at a pub, having beer with the boys, stop right now. Don't quote another job. And you got to listen into this podcast. Okay. So what we're going to cover off today is something called break even margin. Is really, to put it in simple terms, it's what you've got to put on your jobs to basically not lose any money, not gain any money, but just break even. So if we were looking at a scoreboard in sports, it'd be 0-0. Okay, it wouldn't be 1-0 or 0-1. It'd be just 0-0. Okay, we didn't lose anything, we didn't lose any profits, and we didn't gain any profits. All right. So back to that conversation. Sitting down at breakfast or having that pint, you think to yourself as you're talking with the guys, and I'm sure you've experienced this, where one guy goes, "Man, I put like 25 points on my jobs." The other guy's like, "Yeah, I put 30 points on my jobs." Another guy's like, "Yeah, I put 20 points on my jobs." And out of that conversation, the danger that comes out of that conversation is you get influenced by other people, okay, in what they put on their jobs, okay? And the danger of that is that there's a couple of different dangers. Number one, you're not using proven math. You're not using a proven formula to ensure that you're pricing your jobs considering all the things that you need to consider, when looking at, the size of your business, looking at the expenses of your business. So break even margin is really taking into consideration what you have to put on your jobs based upon your overhead expenses, okay? Which, by the way, overhead expenses, we're talking about the heat, the hydro. We're talking about, like, for me, it's this office right now, right? How much space I have. It's those kind of things. Those are examples of expenses. How many trucks you have? How many leases do you have? Those are expenses. Now, those expenses are going to be different for every single contractor out there, okay? So with that being said, every single contractor needs to apply this formula so that they are taking into consideration their specific expenses. So expenses is one part of the equation. So if I'm looking at, drawing a line right down the screen, on the left of me, okay, is our expenses, okay? Going to be different for every single contractor. On the right of me is our sales. So how much sales, have we done so far, right? Or how much sales are we going to do? That's going to be different for every single contractor. So can you imagine if we have those two variable pieces of data, right? Expenses and sales. How in God's name can we be sitting at a breakfast table or having a couple of pints with the boys and taking those conversations into consideration from a perspective of pricing profitably? Those conversations are so dangerous, okay? So if you're having those conversations, don't have those conversations from the perspective of being influenced, by what other people put on their jobs, okay? And what other people's situations are. You've got to understand that you're different than everybody else. So how you price jobs, even though you're going to use the same principle, the same math, the outcome of that, right, On the other side of the equal sign is going to be different for every single one. Okay. As far as how you got to, first of all, determine your break even margin. Okay. So your break even margin, okay, the formula for your break even margin. And we've got this wicked tool, guys, pricing for profits calculator. Okay. It's this great download that you guys can get. It's going to have everything that I'm covering off in this podcast in here. So you can take it, you can use the example, you can reference it, you can share it with your guys. And there's a lot more that's in here what's going to be covered in this podcast. For today, we're just focusing on your break-even margin. And we're going to look at that formula using the same formula and looking at it through a different set of lenses and how we can make sure that we know what our profit break even is, which is basically how much profit do we want to make, and how much, based upon our expenses and our sales, how much profit do we want to make, and how can we factor that in? So when we're pricing jobs, we're pricing them beyond just 0 on the scoreboard and breaking even. We're actually making money, right? Because that's what it's all about, right? We're in business to make money, guys, right? There's a reason why, I named the company Profit for Contractors, is to make you guys more profits. Okay. So let's cut right to the chase. Okay. We talked about the two different variables. Okay. And it's really simple. Okay. So if I looked at this, remember I said there's a line right down the middle of this screen. Picture like it's a bit of an angle. Okay. The formula that we're going to be looking at, it's the top of that formula, which is right in here, is your fixed expenses. Okay. Divided, there's the line, by your sales. Okay. So let's just say, for example, that we've got, let's just take this example right here. Okay. We got $250, right? $250,000 in overhead expenses. Okay. Otherwise known as fixed expenses. And these fixed expenses are expenses that you have to pay regardless of you doing any work. Okay. So that's why I talked about earlier, things like you got to pay your leases on your trucks, whether or not you get any work or not. You got to pay your heat. You got to pay your hydro. You got to pay your phone bills. Okay. You got to pay for the lease of the building. Okay. Or the mortgage that you have on it. Those are things that you have to pay for, regardless of whether or not you do get any business or not. Right. Make sense? Okay, good. So you want to take those expenses specific to your business and you want to divide that by the total sales that you've had over the same period of time. So let's just say in this example, we had a contractor, okay, whose overhead expenses, fixed expenses, are $250,000 and their total sales, right, divided by $1 million in sales. So what's that come up to? That comes up to 25%. So that contractor, let's put this in the context. That contractor, if he put anything less than 25%, I'm going to have to sip my coffee. I'm going to get you to think about this for a second. Let's say he put 20%. Okay. Let's say he put 20% on his jobs. That's right. He'd be losing 5% on every single job that he sold. 5%. Okay. All the time it took him to do the quote, all the time it took to order the material, organize the guys, lay out the job, coordinate the guys on a daily basis, say the job was a month long. Okay. Go through all that time, all that investment. At the end of the job, okay, he would have lost 5% of whatever the job was worth. So let's say that job was worth, I don't know, let's say $10,000, right? He would lose 5% on $10,000. And that's after doing all that work, spending all that time, having all that stress, right? Coordinating all those guys, dealing with, that customer, or maybe that $10,000 was multiple different customers, right? Having to do all those quotes, because we all know, every quote you don't land, right? So just think about all that effort and energy. And he had the right intention that, hey, I'm going to put on 20 points because that's what everybody else does. But he's losing 5% on every single job. Guys, that's a lot of money. Okay. You talk about, most of the contractors I come across, they're almost working for nothing. This is working for less than nothing. Okay. Back to that formula, guys. Figure out, go to your profit and loss statement. We can help you with this stuff, or download the, pricing for profits calculator. Okay. Go to this specific area about, break even margin, and find out what your overhead expenses are. It's super simple. You can get that from your bookkeeper or your accountant. or you can just print off a profit and loss statement and just, take those overhead or fixed expenses. In a lot of cases, the profit and loss statement actually says fixed expenses on it. Take that information, take your sales, say your total sales up to let's say a certain period of time. It could be, so long as you take the same period of time of your expenses over the same period of time for your sales. So let's say we pick 12 months. We want to look at 12 months of expenses and 12 months of sales. Okay. And in this case, this contractor, $250,000 in expenses, expenses divided by $1 million in sales, he would have to put 25% on every job just to break even. Okay. 0 on the scoreboard. So how do we use this to actually make money? Well, a really simple way to use this to make money is let's just take a look at this example. Say this contractor wanted to make at the end of the year $100,000, right? They want to make $100,000. All you simply do, guys, is you just add to that top number. Okay, you add to that how much profit you want to make. So let's say this was $250,000 in expenses, and the contractor wanted to make $100,000. Very simply, add $100,000 to this 250. So it's 350,000 divided by $1 million, which would be what? 35%. Okay, that's it. So if they put 35% on all their jobs and did $1 million in sales, they would make $100,000. Okay, so that's the other side of the coin, right? Like every contract not wants to make the same amount, right? Some want to make more, some want to make less, some want to make something in between. So use this specific to your business, guys. Do not get caught into the trap, okay, of using other people's suggestions, okay? Not like I think they're trying to be malicious or anything, right? I don't think that's the case. I think most humans we're out to help each other, right? You're sitting down at that breakfast table or having a pint, not to hinder people, but to help each other, right? You guys are buddies, right? Right? That's what I used to do. So use this, okay, appropriately. Now, I'm going to put a little bit of secret sauce, a little bit of magic. I don't know if it's magic, but let's now apply this one last piece of this equation. So I'm teaching 3 principles here. The first principle was determine your break-even margin. Okay. Principle number 2 is how to determine your profit break-even. In other words, what you got to put on your jobs in order to make the amount of profit that you want over a set period of time. I'm trying to make it simple and go with here's what we want to make over a span of 12 months. Okay, you could do it on a 6-month period. You could do it, which brings me to principle number 3. You could do it on a monthly perspective. Okay. And this brings me to principle number 3. Okay. How do you use this through different cycles of your contracting business? Well, guys, okay, you might have periods in your business, maybe where you got to go out and a whole bunch of money on equipment. Maybe you have cycles in your business like my dad being a farmer had in his, being a farmer, right? You got spring, you got fall, you got winter. And in those different cycles, there's different fixed expenses. Sometimes they go up, they go down. But a lot of times the sales will go up and the sales will go down. So you can look at this and leverage it so that through the different cycles of your business, through busier times and slower times, you can apply this formula, this break-even margin and this profit break-even formula. Okay, it's basically the same thing, from what I just described, to adjust your pricing throughout the different seasons of your business. Okay, because if you don't do that, all right, what's going to happen in a lot of cases is you might not be as competitive as you need to be. Okay, and when you're really, really busy, you might not be making the profits that you could make. Right, you could be charging more. Okay. So guys, we've got to optimize our ability to make profits throughout the different changes and different seasons in our contracting business. Okay. When times get really slow, sometimes you got to be more competitive. Well, guess what? When you're slower, right? When you're slower, if you can reduce those expenses and you've got reduced sales, right? Then that's going to change how competitive you can be in the marketplace, right? Depending upon those different seasons, right? The slow seasons, the in-between seasons, okay? So make sure you use these 3 principles, all right? Guys, it's going to be a fucking game changer for you, okay? And doing these things also differentiate the competition, okay? Running a business is a tough thing, and winging it makes it even tougher, okay? And I didn't expect, a lot of you guys to know all this that I cover off. Some of you guys are going to know this, and maybe this is just a reminder, right? To go back to your the seasonality of using this equation of break-even margin throughout the different seasons. Maybe you want to expand your business, into different marketplaces. Maybe franchise your business, whatever that is. You've got to be using these key principles, right? Because if you want to have a profitable contracting business, you have to do the things that make you profit. Okay. And this is one of the things. So I'm Andrew Houston from Profit for Contractors. Hopefully that was really insightful for you guys. Pause the video, take this video maybe to your bookkeeper if you're not understanding what information, get them to watch it. But gather the data, use the data, and get the data to help you make better decisions. Okay. And that's it, man. So it's all in your hands, man. It's all in your hands. I'm here and very passionate about helping you guys succeed. I wasn't giving these insights until, I lost my shirt almost. I wasn't giving these insights until I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it wasn't because I wasn't a hard worker. It wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I didn't know any different. Okay. But now we can use that as an excuse. Okay. If you've listened to this podcast, okay, at least specific to break even margin and profit break even and seasonality of your business. So use this stuff, use it now. And if you're not pricing your jobs profitably, guys, you're working for nothing, in some cases, less for nothing. Okay. So I'll see you on the flip side with another episode, another No Bullshit podcast, and we'll catch you on the flip. Ciao. If this video resonates with you at all, let's be real. You're working your ass off, but your bank account, it doesn't reflect it, right? Jobs keep piling up. The team's not stepping up. And no matter how many hours you put in, it still feels like you're treading water. Sound familiar? Listen, it doesn't have to be that way. I help contractors just like you take back control, make more money, and finally build a business that doesn't suck up all of your time in your life. And it all starts with a free 20-minute call. That's it. If you're tired of grinding with nothing to show for it, hit the link below, book a call, and let's fix this. Look, one step. That's all it takes sometimes to start turning this around. Let's make it happen.